Before I open us with prayer, I would like to thank Davey for leading us tonight. And I'd like to encourage you to avail yourselves of the information from the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. I'd like to thank the Congregational Development Commission for making this webinar series with Davey and TENS possible. And I'd like to thank the Reverend Marianne Mello for coordinating all our efforts. We appreciate that. Let us pray. May the thanks we express this evening, O God, be a foretaste of the grateful joy which will fill our hearts when your kingdom comes. Until then, let us grow ever stronger in faith, hope, and love through Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful prayer. And thank you all for being here. It's been nice. This is our fourth in the series, and it's been nice to see some of you from one meeting to the next. So thank you for continuing to come back. I appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and with that, we'll get our presentation started. My name is Davey Gerhard, and I am the Executive Director of TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. We've been doing webinars with dioceses all year long, trying to help get our congregations, all of us, ready for our pledge campaigns, which might be beginning in your congregation in September or October or November. However you do your fundraising this year, please come and find us at tens.org. We have lots of resources to help you think it through, including a ready-to-go annual campaign package. You can download it and print it or email it, and it will work. So we commend that to you. So please go ahead and take a look at that. We're going to be talking tonight about creating a culture of generosity. And our learning objectives include where all things related to money start with gratitude. We're going to recap some of our gratitude practices that we know and that we intuitively understand. We're going to talk a lot actually about money itself, how it's used, how we use it, how we feel about it. And money is a big deal, and it plays a big role in our congregations, and it plays a big role in our lives. So let's open it up a little and expose it. We're talking about choices, particularly around how we spend, save, invest, and how we deal with our money. So we'll talk about choices that we make and how those choices have impacts. And also then, how can we use our time and talent and treasure for mission and ministry in our church? After all, that's what it's all about. We've been given so much, and so that we can give back and we can share. Choices matter. This is a theological opinion. The decisions we make around how we spend and save our money, and the emotional investments or attachments even that we have about money, inform our values and our actions. Some of the choices that we make limit our future choices, and some of them enhance them. This is just a truth about money. Whenever I talk about money with folks in church, when I'm standing at the intersection of money and meaning, I like to remind us that money is a pastoral conversation. Giving is a pastoral conversation. Pledge campaigns and stewardship are pastoral conversations. This is because we put a lot of stuff on our money. Money isn't just what's in our bank account or what our net worth is. Money is also how we define our successes and failures. It's how we plan for our retirement or our children's education or our health needs. It defines so many of our choices and creates so many of our paths, or at least that's what the power is that we give it. So when we're talking about money with Christians, we're talking about our stewardship efforts in our congregations. Don't be surprised if some real stuff comes up with people about their money, because you're not just talking about their pledges or their statements. You're talking about their lives. And this is how we express ourselves. This is a reminder to be gentle with each other as we are standing in the truth about our money. Stewardship is an exercise in gratitude. We are generous because we are grateful for all that we've been given. And so I want to recap a few best practices around gratitude, and we can't say it enough. In his book, 60-Second Stewardship, Conversations on Stewardship for the Church, Charles Cluen, who is the Plan Giving and Development Officer for the Diocese of Maryland, writes that there are 6 words that are most important in stewardship. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And this is so true. We need to remind ourselves to be grateful for all that we've received. And when we ask others to join us in making their gifts to our congregations, we need to thank them for what they're about to do, what they have done, what they will do. Gratitude is where it all starts. So let's make it a habit. If you don't already have a personal daily gratitude practice, how can we adopt one? How can we make that a part of our lives? For me, it starts with a simple question: for what am I grateful today? Sometimes I ask this question in the morning when I'm having my coffee and I'm sitting on my deck and I'm thinking about the day to come. And some days that morning coffee is so rushed and my email is already going off that question doesn't come to me until I'm brushing my teeth at night or until I'm hitting my pillow with my head. But whenever it happens, it's so important for us to have that moment of connection with our gratitude. Remember to count our blessings and to think about them. What am I grateful for? It sets us up to receive gratitude and also to be generous with our time and our talent and our treasure that day. It should be a weekly discipline as well. I have a colleague who has a Friday habit. He takes the last half hour of his day before he leaves his office and he writes thank you notes, either an email or a handwritten note, to people who have done something spectacular for his church that week. It could be a well-placed comment. It could be something amazing that they did. It could be that their potluck offering was really delicious. Whatever it is, he spends some time intentionally thanking them. I think this is such a beautiful practice because he does it every week. He doesn't end a Friday, he doesn't start his weekend without that moment of discipline and gratitude. When I am the beneficiary of one of his Friday messages, it feels good because I know there's been intention behind it. I made the list, and that's nice too. Being gracious people means that we also have to accept the gratitude that others give us. This is so hard for us as Americans, as we are told by our culture that we should be, that somehow humility is, deflecting people's gratitude. And it's not that. We should receive it. When somebody says thank you and they're earnest about it, we should take that moment and say, they've just given me a gift. I'm grateful for that moment of connection. And it's how we get rejuvenated in our gratitude when other people recognize it and enforce it with us. We should think positively, assuming goodwill. Boy, if we could do this, if we could assume goodwill about a situation that we walk into, or a relationship, or even that meeting that we're dreading having because we think it's going to go weird or it has some obvious pitfalls. If we could assume that the people on both sides of that conversation are coming at it from a place of goodness, that they want the right thing to happen, that I want the right thing to happen and you want the right thing to happen. So we're going to be okay with this. We assume goodwill. It's a way of coming into a situation with gratitude at the heart of that. Forgive yourself. This should be obvious, but as people who are called to forgive, we get the parable about how many times should we forgive, and we understand that message. We should forgive others, and we're sometimes even good at doing that. But how often do we forget about forgiving ourselves for those moments of forgetfulness, for those moments of mistake, for those times we've missed the mark? If we expect to forgive others and we expect God to forgive us, we also need to forgive ourselves for the things that we do. And this is really important. It helps us then free ourselves to be more gracious and grateful and generous. Banish jaded outlooks and give second chances. I put this into that category as well. When we come into something and we say, I already know how this is going to turn out. I know what this is going to look like. We don't. We should be ready for surprise. Expect miracles. Maybe the situation could turn itself around. That's not to say be naive or foolish about a situation. It's to say, let's go in hoping that things will go well, and maybe then they will. And we won't be so surprised if it turns out right. Our gratitude leads us into a place where we can then recognize generosity. And so I want to talk about a few situations with our money that involve our own choice making. Choices are important because we have power with our money. Our money doesn't control us, we control it. And it doesn't always feel that way. Doesn't always feel that way when our bank account's feeling a little low, or when we're stressed about finances, or when we're living with debt, or all those things that make us feel like we're not in control. But at the end of the day, there's a lot about our money that we do control. I also want to remind us that these are ethical, or these are values-based conversations. There isn't a right answer or a wrong answer. Those rightness and wrongnesses live within ourselves and the way we approach situations. But every choice we make with money does have an impact. So when we purchase something, when we look at the marketplace of products, what are we looking at? And what are we considering? How those products were made? What are the working conditions, the wages, the access, who made it? And how did that come about? What is it made from? So what went into this product that I am going to consume? Is it brand new? Did something get cut down or taken from the ground to make it fresh? Or is it being renewed from some other resource? Does that matter to me? Am I making a choice that's based on that? What are the choices on either side? If I take it new, or if I recycle something old or reuse something, what is my value around that? And where does it come from? Does it come from far away? Is it holding in it lots of carbon miles, things that have been trucked over great distances or flown to arrive at me? Or was it made locally? Is my government having a war with another country to ensure that I can have this product available to me? Or so are there foreign policy implications in my consumption and my purchasing? Those are big questions. We can't always escape the realities of them, but we can be aware of them. And I think at the end of the day, we need to think about how these choices in our money are awareness raising. What are the policies of our bank? When it comes time to invest our money, we don't just spend it, we also put some of it away, we invest it. So let's talk about our banks and our banking systems. Where we bank makes a difference, and we should know some things about our banks. So how does it view mortgages? Does it have an equal lending practice? Does it do predatory lending? Has it done some kind of behavior that has put populations or vulnerable populations more at risk of their money? We should pay attention to the news headlines, but go beyond them. and really dig into them. Ask some questions. When you're opening your account, how often do you actually ask the manager of the bank real questions about what their bank does with their money? Maybe we should. Maybe we should ask those questions. Where are they investing? What are they doing? How do they make their money? What about our mutual funds? Where our money is invested in the market? Where our retirement plans live? How is that money invested? We don't all have the benefit of having socially responsible investing strategies. Many retirement plans offer them now, but in some they're still a luxury, or they offer a lower rate, and that might have some implication on our future choices and what we want to do with our money. So we should pay some attention to how our money is being invested, because that's our money. Those are our dollars being spent in those ways and being supportive of those different opportunities. So we should take a look at that. And no, again, these aren't about right and wrong answers. This is about having the information that works for you. Now, if we know these things, we can then make decisions about how we feel. And we're going to talk later about advocacy and things that we can do with our money to change choice making or change behaviors around it. But this first part is about knowing. And what about our giving? So it's great to give our money away, but we need to know where we're giving it, what they're doing with our money as well. So when we are investing in a nonprofit, just like when we're investing in a bank or investing in a mutual fund, we need to know that they're doing the work that they say they're going to do. Not every nonprofit is the same, and not every nonprofit respects the rules in the same way. So there are websites you can go to. guidestar.org is a great one, or charitynavigator.org. Both of them will tell you how a charity spends its money, how it gets its money, and more importantly, it'll tell you some of these things like, how much does it spend on its own self? How much money does it pay its executives? How much money is not going into program, but is going into raising money? So whenever we see, for example, a nonprofit that's spending more than 12% of its money on raising money, it's a red flag, right? Because that means 12 cents of every dollar you're spending or more is going towards raising more money. Is that what you want your money to go to? These are questions to ask. And so it helps us understand our investing. When we make choices, they have implications. Who serves on the board of directors of the nonprofits that we support? And do those people represent the constituency of the people that are served by that nonprofit? I used to raise money for a homeless services agency here in San Francisco. And we had a mandate that we had to have some formerly homeless members of our board. So folks who really understood what it meant to be homeless and had gotten themselves through the program. They were so much more helpful on our board than people who had never experienced poverty. They could help us understand how our policies, how our programs made sense or didn't make sense to the people using them. So it's really important when we look at our nonprofits to make sure that they make up a similar they make up the population that they're serving. I love this quote by Stanley Druckenmiller, who manages a massive hedge fund. And you wouldn't think that a massive hedge fund manager would have lots of good things to say about the world, but they do. They're good people as well. They have great ideas. And I love this quote: once you make a lot of money, it's incredibly enjoyable to give it away. It's a way to satisfy the soul. And it does feel good to give our money away. So I want us to run through a couple of questions that we should ask about our own consumer power. And these questions come in the following categories, and we're going to start with positive and negative. So we're always faced with a choice. Do we want to avoid companies or products that we don't support, or be more proactive about it? So this choice may be a false one, right? But we ask it of ourselves. Do we want to support a product because it's something that's important to us? Or do we want to avoid it because we feel like it has some negative consequence? And how is that ethical to us? Where are the ethics in that? Do we want to look at the company or the product? This comes into play, especially when we're talking about big brands that have fair trade or maybe green products that are a part of their larger brand. So do we want to support a big brand that might have other ways of investing and engaging its business because it has some ethical or some things that we deem as ethical or values-based? So take a look at the product behind the company. Fair Trade Certified is a really good example of this. It has a lot of criteria to stamp something as Fair Trade Certified. It has to have met with a whole bunch of different really public, rigorous approval, but it just looks at the product. It doesn't look at the company that sells and markets the product, right? So I could be a big bad person and have really fair trade coffee and be making money off of that, right? So it's great to have the coffee. Is it so great to be the big bad company? I don't know. We need to look at those questions and decide at the end of the day how we want to spend our money or how we want to advocate for that. We are always faced with this question, local or global. Carbon miles are real. They add all kinds of expenses onto things. And if those expenses aren't passed on to the consumer, they are taken out of something else, either to the growers or suppliers of the product. They're probably not taken away from the shareholders and the executives of the company. So we probably need to think about that equation. If there are carbon miles on something and those carbon miles cost something, where are those costs coming into play? And what are the greater causes to the environment or the damages to the environment? Do we produce or believe that we should support things because of where they're made? Or do we think that we should always look locally? Again, these are ethical questions. Do we need them to be in tension? I think that we often create dichotomous choices that don't need to be. Maybe it doesn't have to be something in tension. Maybe we can buy local when it makes sense, and we can buy global when it's supporting an industry in a place that really needs some investment. Again, those are things that if we do our research, if we think it through, we're helping make an overall impact on our own money and the power behind our money. Avoiding and engaging is another question that comes up often, and especially comes up around political things that companies do. And so if the CEO of a company donates to a cause we don't like, what should we do? Should we stop buying that product? Stop going to that service? Stop watching their TV show? What is it that we feel about those things? Boycotts, they certainly put some economic pressure on shareholders or executives, but do they end up hurting the people further down the chain more quickly or more harmfully than they do the folks who are more cushioned, who have some room to allow situations to go on for a while? So I think we always need to look at that when we're asking that question of how should we avoid or engage? Our money has power. Our feet have power. We can move in between things, and our advocacy has power as well. Knowing when to use them is a nuanced choice for us, I think. And so I offer these as as ways in to thinking about how we spend, save, and invest our money. What this means, I think, is that when we go into the marketplace, there are a lot of choices to think about. And that could feel taxing, as in personally, not as in sales taxing. That could feel like we are really putting a burden on ourselves to do a whole bunch of research and to make choices. And all we really want to do is get in and out of the grocery store in under an hour so that we can like get on with our lives, or buy the thing that we need so that we can, you know, wear it to the event and move on with our lives, right? But every choice we make has an impact. And knowing that helps us then make some choices. And we can't always make, so I had this Lent practice one year where I was going to pay the true cost of food, right? So our food is subsidized, let's just say that, subsidized by tax dollars, subsidized by inequity in farm labor, subsidized all over the place, right? And so I thought I had this formula figured out. And so my $5 sandwich probably cost about $13 really. So I had this whole thing where I was donating extra money all the time to different causes, and I was paying the true cost of food. And I was totally, it was a bad idea for Lent. It was a hard 40 days. I had no money left at the end of it because of this experiment, right? But what it taught me was I'm making this choice all the time, right? And so I do buy the sandwich and I don't spend probably what it's completely worth when I look at all the factors. So what does that mean to me? Am I a bad person? Am I a fine person? Am I an okay person? Does it have no impact at all on who I am ethically? I just am someone who's eating a sandwich. These are all things to think through. And that Lent was an experiment I probably won't repeat again. My food budget could not sustain that. And I don't think any of ours could. So when we look at our choices, how are we making them and what are we doing with them? Another question that we get asked often is consumerism or politics? And this gets to the heart of our choice making. So shopping for change seems like a silly concept, right? But do the stores that we shop at or the kinds of products we buy reinforce certain values? Some argue that shopping is more important than voting because you're impacting economies and jobs and sustainability. I don't fully agree with that statement. I think it's pretty important to vote too, but we do have great power with our dollars. Some see ethical consumerism as a distraction. So some people say you should be putting on your shoes and going out into the street. You should be writing letters to your elected representatives. You should be showing up at those city council and school board meetings and not wasting your time dithering about which product you should buy or not. Those choices, how you spend your time and how you allocate it, and maybe it's a blend. Maybe sometimes you put on your shoes and maybe sometimes you think about your debit card and how you're going to exercise your vote in either way. But these are places that we go. Why is all this a part of a conversation I'm having with you about stewardship? It's because all of these things are resources we've been given to steward. Our money, our time, our passion, our care for the global community, our care for our local community. This is all God's gift to us. And how we make the choices impacts our ethics and our values and our ability to make further choices down the line. I'm not asking us to get stuck on these questions so much that we paralyze ourselves, because we could spin around in some of these questions for a long time. But we should be asking enough of these questions that at the end of the day, we feel that the person we see in the mirror is the person we agree with, the person we love, person we honor, and the choices that we've made are good ones and could stand up to some sort of accountability conversation. We need to know what we don't know. There are lots of ways for us to learn more information about the products. I appreciated one of you put into the chat, give.org is another great place to look at nonprofits. It helps you evaluate things. The web has lots of tools to help us learn to dig deep into a company, into a product, into an idea, and see opposing viewpoints and be able to make our own decision about whether this is a product or an investment scheme or a strategy we want to employ. We risk being complicit if we don't do a little research. And complicity or tacit consent in bad behavior is something I think we want to avoid. One of the things I love about the Enriching Our Worship confession that some of our churches use, it's that, we pray for our own sins and those committed on our behalf, right? And we remember that sometimes just being a part of a system has bad choices associated with it. And we may be waking up and going about our lives as normal, but if we are complicit in things done on our behalf, how do we account for that? Certainly our prayer book has an idea that perhaps we are accountable and we need to confess those sins as well and be absolved of them, because the choices that we participate in are choices that we make. Another way to know, so research is one way. Another way to know is engaging each other. Deep listening, heart listening, is about learning from each other how we make the choices that we make about the power of our money. Does our faith inform our spending, saving, and investing practices? We've researched, we've learned, but then we need to talk with each other. What are you doing to avoid this problem, you might ask your neighbor? Or how do you decide to buy the organic chicken versus the non-organic chicken, and the price differential is substantial? Does it make a difference to me? Or another grocery store conundrum, do you want paper or plastic? Which choice do you make? Plastic will be around forever, but something had to be cut down for your paper bag. You could reuse both of them. So where do we make our choices? How do we learn? Research gets us one place. Talking with each other gets us to another place. And deeply listening and then understanding what we're saying. This is the public narrative, right? How we understand each other and love each other. We do this work because as Christians, as people who share values, we rely on each other in our choice making. So I love it when I overhear people in my church saying, not just where did you get that, but why did you shop there? Or how do I do that too? Or what could I learn from that? And those sorts of holy listening, deep listening exercises are really beautiful. As important as it is to listen, it's important to share. And when we share our own stories about how we broke through unethical systems, we inspire others. And I have these two examples that came from conversations I had this summer with friends of mine. One of them was my friend Sumit, and he was really angry at his bank because it had participated in the predatory lending that precipitated the mortgage crisis. And now we're years past that moment, but he hadn't been able to extricate himself from his bank because credit cards and a mortgage and a personal loan were all attached to it. And so it took him a long time to pay those things off. And now he was left with this blank slate. Do I leave my bank or do I not leave my bank? This bank had like helped him, right? It had given him a loan when he needed it, and had, it had treated him pretty well, but it had treated some other people pretty badly. And so he did research. He asked the questions. He went to his websites. He ended up finding an institution that had more of a local investing strategy, did more community-based lending, did more outreach programs about debt and reconciliation, and had really good practices on how they managed credit and who they lent to. So he made a choice. He changed his bank. And we all know how difficult that is, how our banks are tied so deeply into our lives. So it wasn't an easy decision, but it was one that he made. And then I was in a conversation with my friend Megan. They can eat dairy, and but they love baking, and they love cereal with milk on it. And so they were really in a hard place, not being able to digest dairy. What do? Almond milk seemed like where they wanted to go, and they love almond milk. They like the flavor of it, but it's terrible. It's terrible to the land and to the water. It takes so many almonds to make a little bit of almond milk, and those almonds come from trees which take an incredible amount of land and water and labor to harvest and tend them. And so they were thinking, well, this doesn't make any sense to me. What am I doing? Maybe I should find yet another alternative to my alternative milk. And we live in a world now where there are lots of alternative milks. And so they had to do more research. What will work for me? What will work for my budget, but also what will work for the world? And so they had to make a choice that ultimately they made for the planet. That was what was most important to their ethical system and value about this. And when they told those stories to me, and I'm telling them to you, and I've told them to others, but when they tell those stories in the public marketplace, it helps us understand that other people go through these choices. We're not alone. And when we can learn from how they make choices, we then can deeply listen and deeply hear what they have to say about how we do it. And it impacts then how we make our own choices. Henry Nouwen said that our humanity comes to its fullest bloom in giving. We become beautiful people when we give whatever we can give. A smile, a handshake, a kiss, an embrace, a word of love, a present, a part of our life, all of our life. Everything that we have received is stewardship. Everything that we give is a part of our stewardship. And I love this quote from Henry Nouwen that reminds us that everything is tied together. All that we give and all that we receive is a part of who we are. There are lots of links here, and I'm going to give these to you later so that you can look at them, how we make decisions on shopping, how we look at different animal welfare sites to see where our meat and other products come from. Seafood Watch is a great organization that helps us understand how farming sometimes is good or bad, and how wild fishing is sometimes good or bad. And from the labels, we don't know. Something that's raised on a farm feels like it's not taking from the wild. Something that's wild might feel fresher, but are they really what they say? And is the label really helping us? Seafood Watch can really help you drill down and say what's happening here. And it's different for every kind of fish and every kind of region that the fish are in. So you have to pay attention to these things. And of course, living wages. We're seeing this more and more in income inequality. How do the products we use, do they pay the people who make them, grow them, bring them to us? Are they paid wages they can live on, with benefits they can live on, with opportunities they can live with? So these are some websites to help us make some decisions. I'm going to pull us back into the larger group for a minute, and I would love to hear how you make some of these ethical choices in your life, how you see your power of money. And then we're going to watch a short video and have yet another chance to react to it. But I would love to hear from you some of your experiences in ethical decision making about the power of your money. Marianne, start us off.
Amazon now delivers, you can set up to have, if you order a lot from Amazon now sets up a day, you can set up a day for your deliveries to come. So traffic isn't loaded, coming to your house 3 times a week. It might be coming, it could come 1 time a week. That is one thing that I noticed that was happening. And I think we make those choices also in our churches. Are we going to use oil candles or wax candles? Which makes the best sense.
Right.
So I think you can also correlate those things to, how we think about what we purchase for church, how we use our heating and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go.
I think those are great examples. The Amazon one is amazing. And when they started offering that, like combine your boxes, can I wait an extra day for that so that it all comes the same day? I probably can. I was living without it before Amazon, so I think I can probably make this work. It's a great choice. And I love how you bring it into church as well. In my church, we've had conversations about bulletins. They take a lot of paper because we put them in big print, and we do that because, if you're a visitor, you have one thing instead of juggling a hymnal, a prayer book, a visitor card, all these other things, right? And so there's a choice there. Hospitality, and it always comes down to, do we want to be hospitable or do we care about the planet? I'm like, is that really a choice? Are there ways we can do both things? Yes, we all have prayer books and hymnals in our pews. We might not need to print them in the bulletin. Maybe we can explain to visitors how they get through. That would mean we would have to talk to newcomers. Imagine that. So, maybe there are other ways to deal with this situation, but we make these choices in church as well about buying and how we do that. Yeah, Dina.
I also know that we're in the process of creating a solar farm at our camp that produces electricity at lower rates that churches can buy into. So you need to look at, where are we getting our energy from? What are the rates like? Does it make sense for our church to participate in this plan that also supports the solar farm as an alternative form of energy? So there are some things we're doing on the diocesan level that filter down to our churches where decision-making needs to be made. And I also know that my husband and I had a conversation because we had a little chunk of money and we wanted to invest it. So we talked to the investment guy and said, so if it goes into this fund, what does that mean? Like where does that go? Because we were looking, there are designations for different types of funds so that you can get ones that are like B Corps where they benefit everybody, or you can get ones that make a lot of money, but perhaps you want one that doesn't invest in, say, petroleum products, or one that doesn't invest in guns or some other area in which you have particular commitments to either support those things or not. And otherwise, it's just really easy to say, well, which one has the best rate of return?
Right.
So it was not easy to wade our way through all the material.
It's difficult, and it's but you may make the choice. So I'm glad we have choices now. We didn't always have these choices in investing. And they tell you, okay, well, you can do this, but then this is how it's going to impact your rate. And then you have to decide, right? Well, is it worth it to me to have this rate of return? And right or wrong, it's their choices, and how we engage them is the right or the wrong, right? it's that we've gone through the process and made some sort of, based on our own ethical system, we found some ways to make those right. So thanks for bringing that up. It's so important in our investing to pay attention to it. And they make it easier now than they used to. They have to disclose all the funds and where they get their money and what their return is. That at least takes it out of the black box. Thank you. What are some other decisions you've made, if you want to share them, about the power of your money and your ethical choices? Noel, let's hear what you have to say. Come on off mute. Thank you.
Another church issue is stewardship of time and altar guilds. And a lot of places no longer have women who love to iron linens. And frankly, it's one of my favorite things to do, but I'm not doing it 24/7. So we go to polyester cotton instead of linen, and the linens are different, but you don't have to iron them, or at least you don't have to do them as much as you did the real linen one. So it's a trade-off. And it means that people will say, yes, I'll do the linens, because they know they don't have to spend X number of hours over hot iron.
Yeah. I mean, and so even there's a choice then, right? Cotton and polyester gives us yet other choices about where does that come from, what went into producing that polyester vestment or frontal or whatever, right? So when we're using those blended products, they're sold in the marketplace, they're safe, they're choices we can make, and then where does it lead us? And I think your question, how you framed it, wasn't just one about like buying and production. It's then about how much time do we have to devote to this? And so if we don't have a guild of people willing to iron or polish silver the way maybe they might have wanted to at some other point in the development of humanity, what do we do with those, and how do we make those choices? That's a really interesting question, Noel. Thank you. It reminds us that time and talent are also a part of our three-legged stewardship stool, and choices we make. What are some other ethical ideas or choices that you've confronted or thought through or maybe wondered about?
Personally, I made the decision to join a collaborative that is dedicated to eliminating as much as possible the plastic that we consume, that our cleaning products come in, that, you know, and our paper products and all of that. In addition to that, they are committed to planting trees for every so many $1,000s worth of product that they sell, that, you know, is this collaborative. And I think that that's something we could look at as churches too. Do we buy products that are sustainable, that are not harmful to the environment, whether it's the environment that people are coming into a church and breathing? You know, I mean, our breathing seems to be foremost in our thinking these days, right?
It does.
So we could make those choices, but on Noel's topic also, how do we quantify the value of the time to iron linens? You know, it may be that somebody doesn't have $50 a week to give in the plate, but they might have 10 hours or 5 hours. And are we paying them a living wage in a sense to do the linens?
Right.
I mean, you know, $50 a week would be easy to make up doing linens for 10 hours.
Yeah. That's an interesting idea. One of the practices I see in a lot of congregations that I really admire is that on their stewardship pledge cards, they put a time and a talent section. And it could be as easy as, I'd like to participate in these ministries, please give me more information. You check off boxes. But I've also seen where people pledge, like, I'm going to give 10 hours a month to the church to do something, right? And they make that a part of the pledge that gets on their card and gets blessed and dedicated, right? I'm going to do this. And it's a way that we can acknowledge that our churches don't just run on our pledges. They run on us rolling up our sleeves, on us showing up and doing things, because our churches need all of us to do this work. We can't pay everyone to do all of the tasks that need to be done at church. So I really like that idea. I was talking with some very data-minded folks in a congregation who had actually come up with a Excel formula about, how many hours people volunteered, and they put it as like a dollar amount in their budget. And it was like, we're getting this much service from our people. That might be a little weird of a thing to do, because how do you really value people's time and what it is? I might value my time less than you value yours. But so how we do that is completely arbitrary. But I love that they had the practice of saying, over a year, we get 1,000 hours of free work from you, volunteer work, things that are done. And that's really important, right? And I say one other thing in that, Marguerite, and that's just a few years ago, many years ago now, an organization that does capital campaigns in churches called Partners for Sacred Places did a study called the Economic Halo Effect. And they realized that for every temple, church, and mosque, every temple, church, synagogue, and mosque in America, there was an average of $1.1 million worth of service put back into the community just by being there. And this is an average, so that takes into account mega churches with big programs and tiny churches with no programs. So on average, a house of worship in a neighborhood puts $1 million, a little over $1 million a year back into the community by offering space, by giving support, by taking care of people's mental health. I mean, like, if you start to quantify the things that churches do, there's an enormous service that our volunteers provide and that our churches provide our communities that we can't necessarily quantify, but they tried to do it in this study. Yes, Dina, I'll send out the link. And it's a great study. It's totally cool and helps us understand just what our churches do by being there and by doing this work. Thanks for bringing that up.
And just one more thing very quickly. In addition to the quantification of that kind of work, many churches find themselves in the position of applying for grants to supplement, to sustain some ministry that they're about. And there's usually an option to indicate what kind of in-kind services, or you may need to have in-kind services that are being provided in order to qualify for this particular grant amount. So it's not just, a one-way street, in other words.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think churches, we should probably get better about tracking in-kind gifts, not to give out tax receipts or things like that, but so that we know. This is like back to my Lenten thing, like, what's the true cost of doing church? And a lot of it's volunteer hours and food that shows up because it needs to, and suddenly the light bulbs get replaced and you don't know who did it. Stuff like that happens in church all the time. And we should probably be better about tracking it because it will help us understand what we're really doing. And it helps our funders when we have those outside funders and they do want to see evidence of in-kind gifts or know what sorts of in-kind gifts they could provide that would cut off our bottom line some. Those are all great things to be able to track. But it takes a lot of work to track. So going back to the number of hours we have in church, tracking those sorts of things would then be its own job too, right? I love it though. Good ideas. Robert, you've got your hand up.
Well, I kind of wanted to piggyback on what Marguerite was saying, that I do think that's an awesome idea to put on the pledge card time and talent as well, as long as there's teaching about how to give, how to give in those ways. And you might find someone who wants to give their time to do that tracking, which would be an amazing thing. At one of my churches that I served in, there was a guy who loved creating statistics. And he just said, I want to do this. And he would spend hours coming up with these beautiful sheets that showed how our worship trends were going in terms of numbers of people and who was giving. And if you have someone like that in your congregation, that can be part of the stewardship committee to just offer those data, because it does take time. But I think without actual teaching about it, the danger is people start to see it as an either or thing. And we're talking about building a culture of generosity. And I have to say, I've been very disappointed at some people in my church who have said, well, I'm sorry, I can't give any money to the stewardship campaign because I give as a lector or because I give as a Eucharistic minister and my time is my gift. And I was taught to give time, talent, or treasure.
Oh, it's the or.
Word in there. I was like, wait a second, who taught you that?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so how can we encourage that culture of generosity to say, let's see ways that we could maybe tithe in each way. Like, okay, if you're teaching to tithe 10% of your income, what would 10% of your working life be giving to people outside?
Mm-hmm. It's true. I love that idea of tithing our time and our talent, our wisdom, right? We forget how much our good ideas help our churches, serving on committees and doing the brain work that churches require of its members. So I really appreciate what you're saying there. And I think that there are some real ways that we need to ensure that when our stewardship campaigns come, when our pledge campaigns come, we are talking about time, talent, and treasure. And I always say that I want you to give all three in measure, in a way that's responsible for you and your household, and you've prayerfully considered this. Make a right-sized gift for you. But 100% participation is what we're going for here. And whatever that is, your gift doesn't need to be the largest. It just needs to be. Just like your time doesn't need to be more than the person who gives the most. It's not a competition. It's what can you do? It's what can you do? I always love the story of Isabella Stewart Gardner, the famous heiress in Boston, who swept the steps of her Episcopal church every Saturday to get it ready for Sunday. And that was one of the things. She went down the street with her broom and she swept the front steps of the church. And that was her act of saying, I'm going to do this for Church of the Advent on Beacon Hill in Boston every Saturday and get it ready for Sunday. That was one of her ministries. She was a wealthy woman who had paid people to sweep her own steps, yet she came and did this for the church because it mattered, and still managed to give a gift and give her opinion whenever it was solicited. So we give those things freely, or we give those things in measure, and it's a beautiful thing when we give all three. So to that person who needs some help with their or and their and, we really need to teach all three because they're required of us. The church can't operate with just one or two of them. It needs all of our time, talent, and treasure to get it there. Thank you. I have a short video I'd like us to watch, and then we'll have another chance to come back and reflect on it. And this is from one of my very favorite people in the world, Sister Simone. And she lives in Los Angeles. She wrote the book Nuns on a Bus, that they went around and they protested economic protests. And she's very big on issues of poverty, particularly about protecting the poor. And this is a video that's actually an introduction into a program she's running. So she's going to talk about her program, which doesn't apply to us. It's talking about a Lenten program. But what she's inviting the people who are watching this video to do, to think about the theology of abundance and to think about how we are opened when we share our gifts. I think she makes a really beautiful point. So I'm going to invite us to watch this 4-minute video, and then I'm going to call us back together. I'm going to share my screen again.
Hi, I'm Sister Simone Campbell. I'm the Executive Director of Network. You probably know who I am, but I want to express to you how grateful I am that you've joined us this Lent for our journey into 21st century poverty. And this week, the holiest week of our year, is that we know that following in Jesus's footsteps, that this is a week where we remember anguish, pain, suffering, death. The most important part is beyond the death, is that we know, we experience, we live resurrection. And what the resurrection teaches us is that there is enough in our world to go around if we share. Sharing is at the heart of the Christian message, and it's at the heart of what will break open 21st century poverty so that we can live in a new way together. There is abundance in our nation for sure, and abundance in our world. But we need to come at it not with the individualistic approach of how much do I have, but rather with the communal dimension of how do we flourish together. This is going to take some missionary work on our part. We, the people, are going to have to reach out and let others know how abundant our world is. If we step away from our fear, if we embrace the true teaching of Jesus, who said, fear not. It's in his message that we can find joy and hope. That's the message of this week. That's the message of this Lenten journey. So I urge you to stay involved. We're going to have this whole session up on our website, and I got to check this out, but you can find it at networkadvocates.org/21st century poverty. So if you forget something or you want to share it with your friends, that's where you can find it. And then I encourage you to learn more about what's going on in your communities, and then share that, what you discover, with others. And follow us at networklobby.org and on social media, and follow me on Twitter. I'm still trying to get more Twitter followers, SR_Simone, SIMONE. But most of all, what I really want to encourage you all to do is to know that you make the difference in breaking open 21st century poverty. We know that the Christian message of joy, hope, and engagement means that there's enough to go around. And then we will become like the apostles on the way to Emmaus, where they didn't recognize Jesus in the beginning, but then discovered when he broke bread and shared it among them that he was there. There is enough to go around if we recognize his presence in our midst. So thanks for being with us during Lent, and we look forward to the partnership of continuing this work. so that 21st century poverty will be addressed in our nation. Thank you.
Thank you. I love Sister Simone. And I love that message. It's so simple. When we break open, I love that journey to Emmaus, and how it wasn't until Jesus broke and shared that they got it. Oh, wait, this is Jesus here. Because he did the thing that he does, sharing. And this is what we do when we understand that there is actually enough to go around. When I can give up what I have and share it with someone else, or I can share my time, my talent, my treasure with my church, because it's not going to deplete me, it's going to fill me. And so I wonder, in the time that we have left, what you feel about that, what you feel about that journey to Emmaus, that invitation to share as Jesus shares, as our churches need us to share. What are some of your experiences, thoughts, ideas about that, or anything that we've talked about today? How do we understand that message? Oh, Marianne, go on.
I was just thinking, that's okay. I was thinking that, many a times we think about there isn't enough food and there isn't enough medicine and there isn't enough everything, but there truly really is. It's just being equitable. And how do we get that message out through stewardship? How do we, are we being equitable in how we ask people to do things? It's just a thought.
Say more about that. How are we equitable in the way we ask people to do things? I think you're onto something there.
Well, without using examples from my church or churches that I've been in, there are sometimes we have people who have done something for a very long time and do not want new people to do it. It's their fiefdom. And so, we get closed in wanting to share and give other people the opportunity to give in that way. And I'm nothing about Altar Guild or anything like that. Just an example that I can think of right at the moment. But something, any new ministry, being open to letting other people come in and join.
Thank you for that. And thank you also for using an example of time in the way we share. We often talk about resources, think tangible things when we talk about sharing. But I love your example because we are stingy in the way we share our time and the way we invite other people to share time. And I think your call to us to really, let go of some of our own power and our stuff and invite other people into ministry, right? If we're taking all the ministry opportunity and there's still plenty to go around, but we don't give them opportunity to participate, we're losing their gifts. And that could be a tremendous offering. So thank you for that example of sharing our time and inviting people to do it. I love it. Ken and Dina.
Well, I found one of the most powerful things I've witnessed in terms of stewardship is when, you have a great sermon, of course, by the clergy, but it's when lay people are empowered to tell their story of something that has broken open their own awareness of wanting to give in a particular way, or how they've realized the abundance in their own lives, or have been moved to generosity in their own giving. Because people expect clergy to talk about stewardship, right? It's one of those things we're supposed to do. not a lot of lay people learn how to do this or are empowered to do it or do it anything other than sort of a shuffling, begrudging, I feel slightly embarrassed to have to get up here kind of moment. But I know in my past congregation, we had 2 communities of ministry. We had a choir that really was a vibrant community within our church, and in which they built tremendous relationships and gave to one another and the greater community. And people could get up there and they would just glow, talking about coming in, maybe wanting to sing and actually finding community that brought them to life. And the other is the much maligned altar guild, you know, in some places. Our altar guild was this, it was all the introverts uniting. And they would come in and have their own quiet, dedicated way of offering service and beauty to God, and often doing it in pairs, because we would have 2 people working together and a bread baker. And people could get up there and talk about in their own way what it meant to bake the bread for communion. And how that moved them, and they would pray throughout the process, and just things you might not think of in terms of stewardship, but that really are things where I could see people light up, and it's really different than talking, say, statistics on light bills.
Right.
It
Yes.
moves people.
Moves people. They're giving of their own examples and their own, I love that. You know, we're laughing about altar guilds tonight, but my favorite Easter experience every year is showing up early on Holy Saturday and seeing all the people who are very quietly, because the church is a quiet space on Holy Saturday before the vigil, and they're doing all the polishing, getting everything ready for Easter Sunday. And it's all the introverts, right? They're polishing, they're sweeping up flower, you know, all the lilies that have already pollinated. They're getting rid of all that and making sure that the church looks beautiful. And it's this wonderful community of people who have these great gifts. And it's all for this one day that's coming up. And I love it. I love Holy Saturday because it's all the beautiful altar guild and flower arrangers and brass polishers getting ready. So it's a gift. And the conversations, if we ever have conversations that day, are really beautiful ones about the joy of giving and serving in front of the open tomb. Noel.
I served a church in the Berkshires where, much to everyone's surprise, in the early 2000s, there was a huge influx of Hispanic folks. And a lot of them came here, leaving their families at home, worked their butts off to send money home. And they would rent an apartment and live, 10 people in a space that wasn't really big enough for 2. Their biggest immediate need was mattresses. And somehow, maybe it was the sexton who was Hispanic, I'm not remembering, somebody brought that to the attention of somebody else who said, oh, well, I've got a mattress I could get rid of. And it spread like wildfire. In a couple of days, we had received and given out a dozen mattresses. And, there was no advertising, no committee got together and said, let's do this. It happened because it was a need and people heard about it and met it. And I think when we can find a need like that does set people on fire, there's no stopping it. It moved into a much bigger hospitality than just mattresses, but it was wonderful to see how people who might have said the day before, well, I don't want those people around here. Suddenly they were helping and it was great.
I love that. Thank you. Again, this goes to that idea that if we give people an opportunity to serve and tell them what we need, we shouldn't be surprised anymore by the abundance that shows up when we ask, but it's beautiful to see it happen. And sometimes it is surprising as you describe it. I was on a clergy call deep in the pandemic, and one of the vicars of one of our mission congregations that's mostly Latinx, they didn't have reliable internet service. They were trying to be virtual and get their services into the homes of the people who couldn't be with them because they couldn't worship in person. And the vicar just said, I need some iPads. Is there any help out there? And one by one, I heard clergy say, I could buy you an iPad. I could buy you an iPad. She had 12 iPads in 5 minutes from people who said, we could do this. If you need an iPad, put me down for one, from congregations and from other people. So it was, again, like, she didn't know what was going to come when she was saying, who can help my people get online so that they can see the service that I'm providing for them, and they can't come in to a virtual, to our virtual service. They need to see it at home. And this was the way to do it. And so all of a sudden she had enough iPads for her whole congregation to be able to do it. And it was literally very, very little work. And when we are surprised by those beautiful moments, it's a little God breaking through. It's a little Emmaus moment of saying, I see what happened there. I was looking, I asked, and then it showed up. It was some abundance. Thank you for your example. Are there any other thoughts or ideas on abundance, how we create this culture of generosity in our congregations so that everyone can have these Emmaus moments and break through? Yeah, Marianne?
As you were saying all that, I was just thinking that the ask is probably one of the most important ways to get that abundance. If we don't ask or we don't verbalize what our churches need to the congregation, they're not going to know.
Right.
So maybe verbalizing it instead of, a tithe.
Right.
In that manner, verbalizing it in another way, something tangible.
Right. Find the way to ask.
Yeah.
The Ecumenical Stewardship Center reminds us that 97% of the time when you ask in church, the answer is yes. It's very often that people give a flat out no. They will often say, maybe I can't do that, but I could do this, if they don't outright say yes to whatever it is that you're asking them to do. Because church is about choice, right? We all want to be there. We're a part of a community. We love each other. And often we're just waiting to be asked. We didn't know it that morning when we woke up that we needed to be asked. But then the invitation, right? So that's asking is invitation. And invitation is what we're called to do, right? It's different from welcome. It's different from preparing. Invitation is active. And so when we ask, we're doing something really important. We are providing someone an opportunity to do ministry. And that's beautiful, right? We're giving them something to engage with that is fulfilling to them and fulfilling to the church. So this is part of our missional work as well. We can't expect people to provide for things they don't know the church needs. And so we have to ask. The very worst thing that can happen is that somebody says, not right now. Ask me again another time, or ask me for this instead of that. They won't run away from you or slam the door in your face. And if you do offend them, hopefully they give you a chance to chat about it. But the answer is almost never no. And that's our greatest fear, right? When we ask, our first fear is they'll say no. And so I just want to tell you, friends, 97% of the time, that is a false fear. It's just not going to happen. Well, thank you. This was a really beautiful conversation, as have been all the conversations I've had with you over the summer in the work that we've done together to talk about stewardship best practices and generosity in our churches. I'm really excited to have been brought into this work and invited by you to do this work. And so I thank you for that. And I thank you for thinking of TENS. We'll be back next year with some ideas on ways that we can connect. And between now and then, in your stewardship campaigns, if you need any help, if you need a pep talk, if you need some ideas, if you want to run your stewardship letter past us and ask us for advice, we are here. You have my email. It will be in the email that I send you all tonight. And please reach out. We are here as a resource for you to be successful in all the things that you do in your fundraising and generosity this year. So thank you to Canon Dina and to Marianne, Deacon Marianne, for inviting TENS in and for providing this beautiful space, and for you all for attending. Thank you.
Before we sign up, I'd like to put in a plug for the fact that the Congregational Development Commission of the Diocese would like to invite you back in the spring for a feedback session, so that after the people who participated in these 4 webinars have gone through their stewardship campaigns, we can find out what worked for you, what you tried, if you have some stories to share. It would be wonderful feedback for us to hear from you in the spring to find out how this went on this new adventure in stewardship.
Great.
So we're hoping to see you again in the spring. And thank you for your willingness to provide ongoing resources for us as we go through stewardship in our various congregations.
Absolutely.
And thank you again to Deacon Marianne. Would you kindly dismiss us, Deacon?
Sure. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Thank you.
Thank you, friends. Have a beautiful evening. I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.